And a good afternoon to everybody, or good evening, or good morning around the world, wherever you are. I want to thank you very much for joining the latest in the Io-Tahoe series of online webinars. My name is Steve Friedberg, and our very special guest today is Krishnan from Sixth Sense Advisors. I will tell you one of the joys that I have about putting together and hosting this series of webinars is connecting, or in some cases reconnecting, with people I've known for a long time whose opinion and friendship I truly value. And Krish, you're one of them. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Steve. The feeling is mutual here.
Well, thank you. Thank you. By way of quick introduction to everybody, Krish is, as it says here, a globally recognized expert. And you've been ranked as one of the top 25 folks in your field. You have put out some 6 books, I believe, and you've got a 7th one in the hopper, am I correct?
Yes, that's right, Steve. I have the 7th book titled Building Big Data Applications, which will be out in about a couple of months from now, published by Elsevier.
Wow. Congratulations, and let's see where it goes. Now, during this, if you have any questions, folks, if you have any comments, we'd love to see it on Twitter. Feel free, please, to put any comments up on Twitter with the hashtags AIML, data governance, or send it directly to us at Io-Tahoe, etc. The webinar that we have today is automated data governance. And if you just go back to the key concept of governance itself, Chris, you and I have been talking quite a bit before now. This thing is, I wouldn't say it's gotten out of hand, but it's pretty darn close, isn't it?
Absolutely. In fact, I am going to be a little more aggressive and say that it has gotten out of hand, Steve. We have a problem, and we are not acknowledging it yet because it has not hit us in our face. But think of it, in every 60 seconds, you can look at the amount of data we are producing. And if we say that we're not data producers, it's going to be laughable. Everybody who's wearing a smartwatch, carrying a smartphone, produces data every second. So when you're looking at this kind of data coming through, and you want to, look at it either as a customer, a prospect, or a patient in a healthcare system, when you're looking at any of these segments of how to work with that particular person, you are now micro-segmenting data to the lowest granular level you can using lat long so that you're always location aware. And that is where the prime tipping point comes in, where you start saying, hey, I don't have capacity in my database. I need to go to Hadoop. Oops, Hadoop is not the best place to do a lot of analytics. I need to push it into the cloud. And then, ouch, in the cloud, I don't have all the analytics I want. I need to bring in AI. And the journey continues. And that problem is going to be something that needs to be governed. And we are talking about data here. We're not talking about process. We're not talking about technologies, because those tipping points have been already crossed multiple times. And we are at a place where data by itself is delivering value. And data is what is transforming the industry that we are working in today, irrespective of the vertical. In that data-driven enterprise, if we do not have the capability to govern, and when I say govern, it's not putting somebody under the microscope, Steve. I mean, you and I have been in this for so long in the industry that we have seen. It is a process. It is a measurement. It is a metric. It is about ensuring that those metrics are always maintained, managed, and delivered so that you are not left holding the bag after the end of the day when the system is up and running. And this problem has already started causing havoc in the world we live in, and we're going to discuss that later. But if you come to the end result, Steve, this is exactly what we are seeing. Angry customers, angry customers who are not happy in the IoT world with all the modern data, all the modern campaigns, all the modern connects, all the modern social media. Customers are still angry because they believe they are not valued. They believe their information is available to anybody and everybody that can hack and walk away with their information. They are worried that they'll be in the dark web should a hack attack happen. And point in case, look at what happened with Target, Home Depot, Anthem. Look at some of these biggest, havoc issues that it has caused. And at that point, when those attacks happen, you have angry executives. That is what we're showing on the right. These guys who don't know what to do, right? And this.
Well, as a matter of fact, there was just a story that crossed this morning that Wendy's, the fast food chain, has settled out for untold millions of dollars to settle a problem with a hack attack that they had. So it's happening through POS systems remarkably often, and other systems as well.
Yes. And you won't believe, going back to that Home Depot attack that happened, somebody stuck a USB into a furnace when they came to repair it in one store, and that crawled all the way up and went into their CRM system. That attack that they injected. So now,
wow.
So the question is this is a given state. Okay. Now let us go with the fact. Because of the world we live in, because of the connectivity in the internet, because of the availability of virtual technologies, we are always going to be in a point of exposure. And that point of exposure means we need to have points where we arrest that exposure. We take care of not losing information should that exposure get attacked, get penetrated, have adverse reactions that happen because of such a hack attack, such a penetration, such a cybersecurity issue coming up. And how do you make that work? And if you look at it from a cybersecurity perspective, you have the NIST SP 800, 53R5, which is the process that was set up when President Obama was in office many years ago, and it is continuing to evolve, right? This process, if you look at it, is again all about governance. It's about how do you ensure that you are going through the steps that you need to take action on. And at the end of the day, it is all metrics driven. Why? Because that governance is what will hold everybody together in the organization, whether it is a country, whether it is a community, whether it is a Subway franchise, it doesn't matter who you're talking about. End of the day, it is data 24/7 by 365 nonstop. This journey is where I'm having a lot of acid reflux, Steve, to be honest with you, that companies are not taking data governance the way they should in all seriousness. The reason being, they think it is a manual process. They think, I have to set up a committee. Committee has to come up with 50 forms. Then they have to have 25 stewards. Then they have to have 50 other people who are going to report into those stewards about how they manage. That process model is gone. That is history. We are not living 10 years ago, right? We're living today.
But at the same point, the need for them to come up with, if you will, an automated process, an ambient process, as others have described it, you have these regulations that are coming. Mm-hmm. And you have, for example, GDPR. We've talked about that quite a bit. The UK's Data Protection Act of last year. California has its law about to hit the books. And as you see on the map there, a whole bunch of states throughout the United States either have regulations that are currently in the legislature or about to pass. So this thing is, companies need to take a look and get away from the old mindset, do they not? And move rapidly toward how can I automate this process?
Oh, you bet. Not only is it the automation, Steve, so you actually hit the nail on its head. So GDPR is not just Europe. I mean, GDPR is going to impact everybody worldwide. Same is the case with, the UK Data Protection Act. I was in UK this summer with my family, and they were so careful at the places where we stayed. We booked Airbnbs. The Airbnb folks did not ask for our passports, did not ask for any of our information, because it was all handled directly by Airbnb from here. We just went, took the place, stayed, got out. As opposed to going into a Hilton or a Marriott, where they would say, yeah, we need to scan your passports. We need to have copies of those. Now, the creating of those paper copies is the first point of the challenge, where how do you manage that? How do you ensure it is destroyed the minute the customer leaves? And how do you tell the customer that it is not, something that they've crumpled and thrown away somewhere and it could get misused? That is the first challenge. The second challenge that we are not realizing, and this is where I'm going to again come back, this almost to a lot of folks who are on the webinar will sound like they've heard this before. We have created numerous silos of data in our enterprises. We love it. It doesn't matter. Somebody likes one particular database, they'll buy it, they'll create something on it. And then when that person moves on, the second one who takes that role creates another one. The third one who moves on creates another one. And guess what? We have fabricated so much of information that we ourselves do not know what is sitting in a system called legacy, or even prior legacy, or what is sitting in the cloud today. This challenge is going to come face to face looking at you when you're going to bring these regulatory compliance requirements into play. Are we ready for that? That is the question.
With that in mind, when in an earlier webinar, there was general agreement that GDPR was going to affect companies on a global basis. Taken to another level, however, let's talk about CCPA, for example, the California Act. It is supposed to take effect in January of 2020. Yep. Do you see it affecting companies based outside of California? In other words, I may be in New York. Should I be paying attention to CCPA?
Yes, you should. 1000% you should. The reason being, when that regulatory pieces go into effect, it is a statewide implementation of consumer privacy for that state. And if you are having consumers from that state coming into your state and you are a business owner doing business online or offline, you better understand those policies in order to be compliant with those regulatory requirements. Else, you are going to cough up fines. Think of what happened to Google last year. They coughed up $75 million in fines because of lack of governed processes to manage data, right? Like that, California is going to come back after every person. Literally, whoever is going to not have that compliant regulatory requirement met will be fined. So there is economical impacts for every organization. Yes.
So at that point, the whole question of governance, and by the way, excuse the flying slides there for a second, but the question of governance is, as you put it, the solution. The solution awaits that covers all of these points that are up on the screen.
Yep, it does. So let me again draw this, the reason, I have these pillars, if you would, right? So every organization, every enterprise, and Steve, you have seen this multiple times and so have I, right? They have tons of processes. There is processes to acquire data, there is processes to transform data, there is processes to build analytics, and there is processes on processes and processes on those processes. So how do you get across all these processes to understand what data segments do these processes touch, number one. Number two, where are those data segments within the enterprise? That is very key to understand. I'm telling you, if you go and ask a data architect in an enterprise saying, can you show me all your data segments and sources for customer data? He or she is going to point you to one customer database that they are using as a prime central, analytical gold copy of customer data set. But behind that analytical gold copy, there's going to be 50 other data segment distributions that they are not even managing. They're thinking they have complete control over it. That process is massaging and managing so much of data across those segments that it needs to be looked at. That is the first issue in process. Then comes information by itself. You bring data from Twitter, you bring data from Facebook, you bring data from internal campaigns, and then you bring customer and prospect data, and then you do a mixed bag of analytics on that. Fantastic. That information, is it secured? Has it been stored? Is it discarded? Does it have a process on how it is isolated and who manages that process? Then comes the analytics by themselves. You ask any firm, do you do KPIs? Everybody will say, yeah, we are a SaaS shop, we are an R shop. No, we're doing it on AWS, we are an Azure shop. They're going to give you all the bits and pieces that they can. The bottom line issue in analytics is that is only the tipping point that you're having on a dashboard that excites an executive. When you come back, do you have lineage? Do you have traceability? Do you have the ability to understand all the transformations that have gone through? Is that available on demand, and can it be completely run secure when it is on a cloud? Then comes decision support processes. These are the famous data warehouse guys, right? I mean, the reason I'm saying famous is because data warehouse as a concept has never died. We're doing it on the cloud today, where we did it on on-prem. So when you look at decision support, these are the warriors, and I have been one of them in the past too, where it's like, hey, I'm building a data mart, I'm building a data lake, I'm building a segment of a data lake. And when you're getting into these concepts, you are again getting into a journey of isolating data. Are you sure? Ask the question to yourself, looking at the data, are you sure that you complied to all the requirements of how the data should be managed? And then comes people. And the reason why people need to be clear in this is it is not the top level executive, it is not just the data architect, it is not just the project manager, it is not just the folks who are doing applications or analytics or data transformation. It is the entire enterprise that needs to be aligned to sing the same song. How do you make that work? How do you get that alignment? How do you ensure that it runs perfectly fine? Now, when you're looking at all these questions, this is where that solution awaits you. This is where governance helps you across all those pieces we have spoken about, right from process all the way till ensuring people understand what needs to be done, which includes the journey of data, the journey of decision support, the journey of analytics, the journey of information. All of that can be managed effectively. So think of it for a minute. California Consumer Privacy Act. How many silos of data do you have? Let's go and ask one of these big hotel chains. How many silos of customer data do you have? And they're going to look at you like, what are you asking me? Or let's go and ask one of these enterprises, how much of patient data do you have as a hospital? When you're looking at that, they're going to ask you those questions. This is where the problem is. This is where I'm having an issue where governance can help.
In that respect, governance can no longer be done manually, especially as we take a look at the data explosion, which is just, it's kind of like a reverse hockey stick if you think about it. The hockey stick effect with prices coming down. Well, this is just the complete antithesis. We start small, and there's no sign of it slowing down whatsoever.
Absolutely. Now, look at the size. This is where I want all the attendees to understand. We're saying we're going to grow from 33 zettabytes. We're not talking terabytes, guys. We're talking zettabytes. We're not talking petabytes anymore. We're going beyond that to 125 zettabytes. Look at the explosion, and that's by 2025, which is 5 years from now, literally. If you take 2019 out, we're already into month 2, finishing month 3 starting. If you take 2020 to 2025, within the next 5 years, that's the explosion of data that we're talking about. When you're looking at it, this is data across the internet alone. This is not data across enterprises. This is data of enterprises in the web. How do you now handle this problem point that we spoke? And if you go to the prior slide, Steve, I think that is where you said data can be managed, manually, right? No, the prior one, the one before that.
There you go.
This governance, right? When you look at that data sizing, that governance is going to be something that is going to look like it is opening the floodgates and you're going to drown, because we are used to only doing it manually because of the human ego component. That is where I'm saying the issue is. The issue is we got to let go. We got to become dispassionate about the process and say, hey, I have an ability to do this in a different way where I can deliver more value. How can I get into that process? This drown can be stopped.
So do you see then something like GDPR, something like CCPA, or any of these other acronyms of privacy? Is it finally serving as a wake-up call for companies to say, yes, we need to do it and perhaps initially drag them kicking and screaming into it?
I do. And in fact, I would say if it's a wake-up call, it would be a little too late. I think it's got to be the call to actually become automated, the call to actually become, dispassionate about what they own and become passionate about how they manage what they own in terms of data. This is why that aspect of understanding the growth, which is that next slide you showed on IDC, becomes very critical. Because when you're looking at this kind of data, you are now going to drown, not just drown, you're going to be completely submerged. So this is where that explosion needs to be understood. This is where the privacy becomes something critical. And let me be very clear in that. When I say privacy, for example, when Steve and I know each other as friends, we know each other as friends, we know where we live, we know our phone numbers, but it is not that we're going to exchange our bank account numbers as friends. That is privacy. See, this is exactly the concept of privacy that each one of us has as a person. And that privacy in a 175 zettabyte environment, can you imagine what kind of issues it's going to wake up and showcase? It's unbelievable.
But Chris, you brought up a real good point just then. You and I have traded phone numbers because we wish to. And I think that that's what goes back to the whole concept of GDPR or any of the other regulatory rules that are out there. You may have the information that I wish you to have, but the right to be forgotten encompasses that stuff that, no, you don't need that about me. So determining what is good and what is not from a customer point of view is something that companies really need to pay attention to, do they not?
Yes, they do. And they
especially, I was going to say, especially across this entire breadth of things. Take a look at that slide.
Absolutely. So if you look at this, right, this came from our original, data management body of knowledge, which I also have authored the second volume as a co-author, about 3 chapters. And if you look at this process, and we're looking at each segment here, Steve, look at everything that touches data governance, all the way from, data architecturing, data modeling, data storage, data security, data integration, the documents and the content that go with the data, the reference data, the data warehousing and BI, metadata, data quality. Each of this, that is why I was talking about the process point. They're all multiple processes. They're all multiple pieces of information being transformed and handled. And we have no idea how much of that comes from what source, where does it lie, who manages it, where does it get archived, how does it get deleted. There is systems set up, right? In the initial setup, there is documentation developed. But as systems evolve, as the explosion happens, that is where this process is forgotten. It becomes one of those, we'll get to it. And that's the issue that is coming back to kill us now with the explosion of data. And this has to be looked at, Steve. This is why I'm so passionate about this subject, this automated data governance subject, because this needs to be looked at. This is where all the touching and feeling and exchange of information non-stop happens.
And by the way, in case you're just joining us or have joined us late, this is Krishnan who's giving us the insights here. Krish is with Sixth Sense Advisors and has published a number of books. And this is, of course, one in a continuing series of webinars sponsored by Io-Tahoe. So, Krish, if we assume then that governance is needed, and that people cannot do it by themselves anymore. There are different forms, different versions of how it's being described. One prominent analyst firm has referred to it as ambient data governance. You prefer the term, I know, automated data governance.
Yes. Because
why?
Ambient, I'll tell you why. Ambient means, again, you're introducing it as, hey, I'm giving you an injection. Think of it. It's niceties. You're ambient, you're there. No. You're automated. It's not just about being ambient. It's about being automated and being able to manage it automated so that the nitty-gritty pieces of data transformation, of data tagging of data profiling, of data, semantics, all of those can be done outside of anybody touching it. When you remove that human element away and you make it machine executed, you are now introducing a whole different situation. And I'll tell you this, right? I mean, across the customers I've been working in the last 3-4 years, this is what has been the most passionate architecture process I've been talking about is how do you remove all these pieces and make it machine? How do you make it machine run? How do you make it machine, executed? And there are some of my current customers who've seen the benefit. For example, at one of my largest customers, they've gone from replacing a traditional ETL tool, which would take 72 hours to process a file, into Elastic with Python in the backend, and that same file gets processed in 3 minutes for all the processes that was being done by that ETL tool. And the data is ready for somebody to search, analyze, and move from that point forward. Now, 72 hours to 2.5 minutes, automation. That is why I'm liking that term automated, because now not only are we providing somebody the value, we are also creating that segmented management of data. We have about 7 sources coming into this platform that I'm talking about. And all the 7 get merged, get tagged, get categorized. And then they're analyzed, segmented, processed on different algorithms. And all of this, when you talk about ML and AI coming into picture, now you're talking about something that is not just today's state, it is future proof. Because you can manage this on-prem, on cloud, off-prem, wherever you want, one code base, executed multiple times. That is why I'm liking that term automated data governance. And like I have said, Steve, I don't have an issue in however that's called, right? People can choose. Because language is a funny interpretation of how somebody likes a word. Whatever may be the case, to me, automated data governance is where that successful outcomes is established. Now, when we say successful outcomes, it is the outcomes of the process of ensuring data privacy, regulatory compliance rules are put in. When those rules are put in an automated fashion and removing human intervention in those steps, you are reducing risk and you're increasing efficiencies of data integrity. And if data integrity is met, your decision support system and your analytics system will fly through without any issues, because the data that comes in has all those pieces and parts needed appropriately. And for example, think of it this way: metadata. Krish doesn't need to see all the credit card numbers. Krish needs to see only the last 5 of the credit card numbers because he's a call center agent. Steve is a call center manager. Steve needs to be able to see all the credit card numbers in order to have customer conversations. You can manage that. It is a process. When data comes in, set the rules and run it. When you set the rules and run it, that data is stored. Now think of California Consumer Privacy Act. Customer does not wish for a company to retain his or her records. So they opt out. They say, hey, we're providing you our information, and they sign an opt out saying at the end of this transaction, opt my information out. Immediately set a process. At the end of that transaction, as soon as it is done, monies are exchanged, send a note saying, hey, customer information has been marked for removal. It will be removed in the next hour, or it will be removed tonight, whatever the process point is. When you're doing it, and when that orchestration happens, you are having a phenomenal smooth flow of operations. Is this possible? Is this something that can be touched, felt, done in reality? Yes, it is possible. Today, we have a technology that is helping us get to that long-awaited model of execution. And that needs smart data discovery. And when we use this word smart, again, people think of many things. In my simple, honest 2 cents, Smart is about making some piece to behave the way you and I behave as human beings. When that smart is introduced into this data governance process, that distribution of information that I spoke a few slides ago is all of a sudden managed automatically. For example, I go into my smart AI process and I use the word customer. You know what my machine learning algorithm does? It starts looking for the word customer throughout my databases, throughout my applications, throughout all the locations of information, analytics, and associated processes that I have. And it starts understanding that a customer is also called a prospect, a customer is also called a patient, a customer is also called a provider, a customer is also called a manager, a customer is also called an agent. So it says, okay, hey, I have all these tags that mean the same. And the next time it runs, and the next time another data set comes, it tags and it immediately shows to you what is there. Imagine if I can do this automated. And that is where, Steve, I'm coming back to saying the smart AI ML driven data discovery mechanism that will be provided with a tool like Io-Tahoe is something that the industry needs to wake up to. Because today we are not in that luxury of saying, I'll do this a year from now, I'll do this 2 years from now. That day and age is history. We need to do it now. We should have done it yesterday. That is the speed at which we need to think. And the tool will make that piece come to its life the minute you start that process. That is why this technology is very exciting to look at.
And it can be used across multiple applications. I mean, for example, let's focus in the middle. Let's start with CCPA because that is yet to be officially implemented, but companies need to be looking at it now, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So think of this for a minute. We all travel across the US multiple times, and we all take flights. We all book hotels. We all rent cars. We all pay for our food using our phones, our watches. Think of all that little bitty pieces of data that you're leaving behind. How do you align it? How do you collect it? And how do you integrate it into a repository which can then be archived based on customers' demand? That is where that application of this technology solution will come into play. You don't need to do anything. The minute you set that smart machine up, it starts doing the work that you need to do. It removes pieces that you and I think are redundant, or we are like thinking it is laborious. That can be given to the machine, and it does it without any sweat, 24/7 by 365. And that is what GDPR wants you to do. That is what most of the other unified rules engines that are going to be introduced by all the other states in the US over the next 5 years will want you to do. So the minute you are ready to train these patterns and you're ready to launch, neural networks with this system, which it will do behind the scenes, you will see the importance that it will bring to the data in your organization. Absolutely, 100%.
Now, I know that you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, Io-Tahoe.
Yes.
You've taken a look at the product. How do you see it playing directly into helping companies in this slide, to meet the needs of this slide?
So think of the way you would go and assess a product to do this work is, does the product actually have smart, which means, is the product something that supports machine learning? And if it supports machine learning, does it have neural networks and algorithms built in? Yes, Io-Tahoe comes with those features out of the box. The product has been designed and built by people like you and I who have earned their war stripes on how data governance has been a nightmare over the years. So when they built the solution, they decided to take all the pieces that are laborious to data processors, and they said, let's remove this laborious human element of interventions and make it automated. When that automated happened, check the box for neural networks because it can learn new patterns, discover new contexts, and can alert you. And not only can it do that, it can do data discovery. It can manage data alignment. It can also do data segmentation. It can also do data masking. It can do data archival. You can make the system do whatever you want it to do as long as it aligns to the process of implementing a automated data governance mechanism for the enterprise. That is the reason I'm coming back to the tool. On how do you do it?
So what we're talking about there, all of this goes into the concept of smart data discovery, where you can discover and then ultimately search for the data that you need.
And ultimately align that data and take action on it. That is the outcome.
So if we're going to define success here, let's assume that we have, that as a company, I've decided, yes, I need to move and I need to move now. And it's no longer enough to simply do this on a manual basis. I need to automate the process of data discovery, data governance. And I do deploy a tool like Io-Tahoe. Now, what are the payoffs? Where do we see real results?
Absolutely. You're asking a fantastic question. And that's why I have this picture of the brain, because in my opinion, if I am wearing a hat of a chief data officer, I have to be very clear in terms of how my people behave, and they have the ability to execute a function in a planning and a strategic mode. They have concentration, which helps them focus on how to solve the issue. They are thinking really fast, right? As human beings, that is where we beat the machine even now, because we can think and react as soon as we want to, and they have abilities of remembering episodes. So in my mind, I still can think of communication being key. And I go back to almost 1999 when I was working on a client with Ford Automotive, and that incident still comes up to my mind in data governance. And then obviously the calculation and problem solving pieces. We have to mimic this human cognition, and that is where the first thing that I feel Io-Tahoe has done as a system. That is why I'm looking at how does this tool work. It mimics human cognition. By mimicking human cognition, the guarantee that I get, Steve, is that I can remove human intervention. And I'll tell you why human intervention needs to be removed. Data profiling. We write a rule. 50% of our data didn't match this rule. Ouch, let me go and write another rule. Now it is removing 30% of data away. Why? Remove that. If you take the cognition of how somebody can do all of this work and make it a smart processing neural network algorithm, you are empowering the system to react the way you would react. You are giving the system the ability. Now, I'm not saying remove human beings out of the job completely. What I'm saying is, by doing this in an automated way in a data governance fashion, you can bring that 5% or less than 10% of data that needs to be really looked at and managed should there be a need. And that is where you remove all the doubts and then you deliver results. And what are the results? The results are the ability to first discover data across multiple systems in the enterprise, the ability to tag, categorize, classify, segment, manage that data, the ability to then decide whether you want to archive the data, delete the data, integrate the data into one platform, remove data. You can do all of that automated, set the rules up so that it would mark it, and then it would come back and tell you, I've marked all of this, is this correct? Again, that human piece of, yeah, this is correct, is where that intervention needs to happen, and that's a governance process. But by doing that, what are you doing? You're increasing customer confidence. Why is that confidence needed to be increased? Because then you have complete control of information across the enterprise, and that gives you the competitive advantage. In a data-driven organization, going back to Thomas Redman's book, he has a chapter on how do you gain confidence and get competitive advantage when you're having complete data-driven transformation. If I know exactly what comes in, who touches it, what transformations happen, its life cycle, my compliance and regulatory requirements, and how I manage its exit point, I am having a competitive advantage. And that is what we are looking at, Steve.
So let's put things into perspective. There are a lot of people who are on this webinar right now, and some may be in a position of decision making who say, yes, the points that Krish has made are really great. I need to move, and I need to move now if I haven't already done so. But also, let's assume that some of the people on this webinar are not quite at that level in the organization, but they realize the need for what you're describing. What would you tell them? How do they go to their superiors and say, guys, I've just seen this webinar and this makes incredible sense. Where are we in this journey? And if we haven't started, by golly, we need to get moving now. What would you tell them that is the best way to approach their superiors?
Well, if I wear that hat for a minute, Steve, I mean, being a consultant, sure, obviously I can do that role play. I would first have to, I'd first have to be thinking how to align this problem point, right? I mean, we spoke about some generic, situational pieces coming up as regulatory compliance, but any enterprise today has the same requirement across multiple regulatory and multiple compliant processes of data management and how data governance should be done. So rather than bringing up the subject of saying, we don't have data governance, or how much of data governance impact do we have, that may be the wrong approach. What you would need to do is you need to build a storyboard, and the storyboard has to be, hey, we've been looking at this problem. I've been a member that has been working on this, trying to figure out a solution. And here are some thought processes that were discussed in a webinar recently on why automated data governance in the new data journey, because this transformation, it is not understood by people today, but come end of this year, they will understand this. Everybody will be gung-ho about getting this done because 2020 is not too far away. So when you're looking at that storyboarding, that is where you go with the storyboard to your boss and say, you know what, let's actually look at what this actually encompasses. How might this help us solve a problem? And then as the storyboard builds, then you go to the data architect, you go to the chief data officer if there is one such person, chief analytics officer. Once you build the storyboard and show them what this storyboard needs to deliver, then you will get support automatically. It doesn't matter at what level you are in the organization, as long as you have that storyboard really well built. And there is a lot of use cases on Io-Tahoe's website that people can get to and understand how Io-Tahoe should be actually used. Steve?
I am here. I had it on mute for a second, and I apologize. I was going to say that if you can position it in the terms of, yes, we have to do this, but when we do it, we may actually gain a competitive advantage over those who are dragging their feet. That helps as well.
Correct. Not only that, I mean, think of this as something that you have to do. It is not, yeah, we'll do it when somebody else thinks about it. You are the change agent. Whoever is listening to this webinar, whether you're listening to it live or you're listening to a recorded session, remember this. You are the change agent. You are the transformation thought process, persona that can take this to the next step. The reason being, if you have understood what we are describing as a problem here, there is a lot of data. There is silos of information. There is too much of risk at this minute of that data set leading to a non-compliance issue that will ultimately become a problem of both economy for the organization, where you have to pay a large fine, and you have to implement a process at that point in order to avoid future fines. So if you take a step back and come through this thought process clearly, automated data governance will first help you to isolate, segment, classify, and tag all the data across your organizations. We call it smart discovery. Once smart discovery comes back with results, you then set a business rules engine that's going to go and do the rest of the actions you want on how to manage the data, how to align its semantics, how to look at its life cycle, and how to ensure that all the compliance requirements are met, managed, and you run a report at the end of it, which is very important to say that you've implemented this compliance requirement and here is the report that satisfies that requirement. That is the end state outcomes that the storyboard that I'm talking about needs to have. And that is something very vital for survival of data within an enterprise. And in the cloud, data is the lifeline and the blood of every organization. Process will always be there. There is no doubt. But that process is microservices. The process is, driven by Lambda architectures. We're talking about all these terminologies of how the cloud will transform. The cloud will transform the mechanics of the works, but the cloud will not transform the data by itself. The cloud will not transform the life cycle of the data. The cloud will not, give you the ability to say, yeah, you're on the cloud, so your data is handled. No. This is where you will need automated data governance to be that storyboard, to integrate all the data touch points and manage it efficiently so that you're agile, you are available, and you are compliant. So I think that in a nutshell is what we've been discussing for the last 30, 40 minutes in this webinar. And that is the storyboard that I'm recommending that everybody stitch as you think about how to do this.
So change agents, you have your instructions. Chris, thank you so much. Once again, if folks want to get in touch with you, where can they reach out?
I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @DataGenius. So send me a direct message and we can always catch up and converse. And that'll be the best way to reach me.
And you also have the book coming out. You said it's going to be available when?
Right now, Elsevier has said that it will be in August, release date.
That's fantastic. Krishnan, thank you so much for your time. Folks, we want to thank you for your time taking part and joining us for this, the latest in the ongoing series of webinars from Io-Tahoe. In the meantime, stay well and thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.